Imagine you're 21 years old, you pack up your stuff, you leave your hometown for a religious pilgrimage, and you figure, well, I'll be gone for maybe a year, maybe two.
Yeah, standard trip.
Right. You tell your family goodbye, but you don't come back. You keep traveling for 29 years.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that timeline.
Exactly. I mean, you cover 75,000 miles, which, if we look at a modern map, is roughly 44 countries.
Wow.
And along the way, you survive shipwrecks, bubonic plagues, highway bandits, and some seriously paranoid, bloodthirsty tyrants.
It honestly sounds like the plot of some sprawling fantasy novel. But we are talking about meticulously documented medieval history today.
You really are. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking the incredibly wild life of Abu Abdallah ibn Battuta, the ultimate 14th century globetrotter.
The absolute king of the pre-modern road trip.
Yeah. And as we get into the mechanics of his journey, looking at his dictated memoir, the geographic realities, and even the macroeconomic breakdowns of how he survived, it becomes clear this is way more than just a travelogue.
Oh, totally. I mean, the broader implications of his journey, they give us a literal masterclass in risk management, right? In how to leverage intellectual capital and how to navigate a highly globalized world centuries before the internet was even a concept.
Which is fascinating for anyone listening today. But quick disclaimer before we dive into the medieval wealth building and massive signing bonuses and dodging market downturns. While we are discussing the historical accumulation of wealth, this is definitely not financial advice.
No, absolutely not. Please do not ask your boss for a signing bonus paid in medieval dinars.
Right. But, I mean, the strategies he used to survive and thrive, they carry this underlying logic that feels incredibly modern. It's super relevant to you today, whether you're an investor, a policymaker, or just, someone trying to navigate a crazy job market.
Yeah, human nature and economics really haven't changed that much.
So let's unpack this. Every journey has a launch pad. Before Ibn Battuta was, crossing oceans, he was a student in North Africa. We need to understand who this guy was. And what kind of massive incentive could push someone out the door in an era where travel usually meant, well, death?
Right. So we start in the year 1304 in Tangier, Morocco. He's born into this Berber family of legal scholars, and he gets an extensive education in Islamic law.
Specifically the Maliki school, right?
Exactly, the Maliki School of Jurisprudence. And to understand how he survived out there for decades, we really have to look at how he was taught. Because this wasn't about, creative writing or abstract theory. It relied heavily on rigorous, uncompromising memorization.
Like hardcore rote learning.
Oh, beyond hardcore. Students were expected to commit thousands of pages of complex legal precedent, religious text, poetry, all of it, entirely to memory.
So by the time he hits adulthood, his brain is essentially this walking offline database of medieval law.
He was a human flash drive, just full of legal codes. Yeah. And so 1325, he's 21, and he sets off for the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca.
Which was the initial spark, but the structural incentives here are enormous, right?
Huge. Completing the pilgrimage and getting that title of Haji, it offered tremendous religious and social prestige. It was a massive career accelerant back home. But even more crucially, by leaving Morocco, he was stepping into the Dar al-Islam.
The lands under Islamic rule.
Right, the vast network of Islamic territories.
Which, if we look at the 14th century, is experiencing this unprecedented economic boom. It stretches from West Africa all the way to Southeast Asia. And when I look at the mechanics of this territory, this modern analogy instantly jumps out at me. The Dar al-Islam functioned remarkably like a medieval European Union.
That parallel actually holds up incredibly well under scrutiny.
Right, because think about it. In the modern EU, you have this massive zone of free movement. You've got a common currency like the euro, shared regulations. Yeah. And for Ibn Battuta, the Dar al-Islam had a common legal code in the Sharia. They had trusted, standardized currencies, the gold dinar, the silver dirham.
And a shared language of scholarship, which was Arabic.
Exactly. So an Islamic law degree was the ultimate universally recognized passport. He could cross thousands of miles of borders and still be recognized as this highly skilled professional.
And that shared infrastructure, it just drastically lowered the friction of travel and commerce. You didn't have to relearn the rules of business in every new town.
But, okay, wait. That brings up a massive logistical hurdle for me.
Okay, what is it?
Travel in the 1300s, even on this great cultural highway, was prohibitively expensive and wildly dangerous. So You're a 21-year-old kid, you don't have a massive trust fund, and carrying literal chests of gold coins across the desert is basically just an invitation for bandits to murder you.
Oh, 100%. It was a neon sign saying, rob me.
So how is he physically paying for his food and his shelter for 24 years without getting robbed every 5 minutes?
Okay, so this is where it gets brilliant. He funded this entire decades-long road trip using what we could call convertible intellectual equity.
Convertible intellectual equity. I like that.
Yeah, he didn't carry gold. He carried his identity. And this operated through this specific medieval institution called the WACS system.
The wax system.
WAQF. These were charitable trusts funded by wealthy donors. We're talking rulers, successful merchants, pious elites. Under Islamic law, these trusts were legally obligated to provide housing, food, and stipends to traveling scholars.
Okay, but wait. In a world without digital IDs or passports or background checks, how does a random guy from Morocco just show up in, like, Damascus and prove he's a scholar? How do they know he's not just a grifter looking for a free meal?
And that is exactly where the rigorous memorization of the Maliki school pays off.
Yeah.
Your credentials were cryptographic. You either knew the material or you didn't. There was no faking it.
Oh, wow. So they test him.
Basically, yeah. Ibn Battuta could walk into a college or a mosque that was supported by a waqf, sit down with the local scholars, and just immediately demonstrate his legitimacy.
Just start reciting precedent.
Exactly. He could debate the finer points of inheritance law, recite the lineage of his teachers, speak the high-level academic Arabic of the elite, and once he proved his intellectual capital, the waqf unlocked its resources for him.
That is insane. It acted as, like, a medieval universal basic income for intellectuals.
UBI for the 14th century, yeah.
Wealthy elites park their money in these trusts, and that capital circulates through the economy by funding human infrastructure. He travels the world using his education as a limitless credit card.
Which perfectly sets up the ultimate payoff of this system. He leverages this intellectual equity to travel through Egypt, Syria, Akka, down the coast of East Africa, back up through Anatolia, and eventually cross the steppes all the way to India. And India is where he hits the absolute jackpot.
The Delhi payday.
The Delhi payday.
Let's talk about Delhi, because the macroeconomics of this just blew my mind. So the Sultan of Delhi is a man named Muhammad Tughlaq. He is fabulously wealthy. He's sitting on a massive agricultural surplus, but he has this severe political vulnerability, right?
A huge one. He is a Muslim ruler governing a vastly majority Hindu population, and he is widely viewed by his subjects as a complete tyrant.
So a ruler in that position, he desperately needs legitimacy. He can't entirely trust the local entrenched elites because they might overthrow him, so he needs to build a bureaucracy that is dependent solely on him.
Right. So what does he do? He buys credibility. He engages in this aggressive corporate talent acquisition.
It's totally corporate talent acquisition.
He starts importing foreign Islamic talent to make his court look cosmopolitan and prestigious to the rest of the world. Tughlaq wanted foreign judges, scholars, administrators.
And in walks our guy, Ibn Battuta.
Leveraging that exact same legal background. When Ibn Battuta arrives, the Sultan offers him a staggering signing bonus. 12,000 silver dinars.
12,000.
And on top of that, he is given a luxury mansion and a guaranteed annual salary of 5,000 dinars.
But the mechanism of how that salary was paid, this is the part that is just fascinating to me. He isn't getting like a direct deposit from a central treasury. He is assigned the tax revenue from 2.5 peasant villages.
Right, it was a system called Ika. The Sultan essentially grants Ibn Battuta the yield of that specific land.
So he doesn't have to go out and collect the grain himself, right?
No. The Sultan's local officials extract the wealth from the peasantry, convert it to value, and then hand it to Ibn Battuta to fund his lavish lifestyle in his mansion.
I mean, that is sovereign wealth management on a terrifying scale.
Yeah.
You are handed the economic output of hundreds of human beings as a perk for taking a government job.
It was a very different world.
But basic logic dictates, if the signing bonus is a mansion and 12,000 dinars, the working conditions must be an absolute nightmare. Nobody hands out that kind of wealth without massive, massive strings attached. What was the hidden cost here?
The catch was that Muhammad Tughlaq was violently paranoid and completely unpredictable. Working in his administration required an insane level of stress tolerance. I mean, Tughlaq would execute people daily for the most minor infractions.
And his method of execution? It wasn't just a simple beheading.
No, it was pure psychological terror. He would sometimes throw prisoners to elephants that had swords attached to their tusks.
Swords attached to elephant tusks?
Yes. The elephants were trained to toss the victims in the air and slice them to pieces, all while bugles and drums played in the courtyard.
Okay, so you are living in a luxury mansion, but every time you go to the office, you might be tossed to sword-wielding elephants if you look at the boss the wrong way.
And Ibn Battuta very nearly ended up in that exact courtyard. He made a massive political miscalculation.
What did you do?
He befriended a local Sufi holy man.
Okay, let's define that for a second for anyone who doesn't know. A Sufi is a mystic, someone focused on the internal spiritual dimensions of Islam rather than just the rigid legalism. But why would befriending a mystic put Ibn Battuta on a death list?
Because Sufi mystics often possessed immense street credibility among the common people. They commanded deep grassroots loyalty that a state ruler just couldn't control.
Ah, I see.
And this particular Sufi refused to obey the Sultan's political commands. He viewed earthly power as corrupt. So to an absolute tyrant like Tuluk, populist influence outside state control is a mortal threat. So the Sultan had the holy man tortured and beheaded.
And because Ibn Battuta was known to be his
He
friend.
was immediately placed under armed guard, suspected of treason, guilt by association.
Oh man, but you can't just hand in your 2 weeks notice to a guy who executes people with elephants.
No, you definitely can't. Ibn Battuta fully expects to be executed at any moment. But he realizes something crucial. His wealth and his high position are exactly what make him a target. So he deploys this extreme survival tactic. He liquidates his entire life.
He liquidates everything.
Everything. He gives away his wealth, renounces his government position, strips off his elite clothing, and goes to live as a starving beggar in a cave for 5 months.
I mean, the logic there is brilliant in its desperation. If you have wealth, you have power. If you have power, you're a threat. By living in a cave, fasting and praying, he physically demonstrates absolute political neutrality. He basically becomes so pathetic that he is no longer worth killing.
Exactly. The sheer optics of asceticism saved his life. The Sultan eventually calmed down, saw him living in a cave, and called him back to court. But Ibn Battuta knew the political risk curve had gone exponential. He needed an exit strategy, like yesterday.
But how do you resign from a tyrant's court without looking like you're fleeing?
You volunteer for a diplomatic mission. The Sultan wanted to send an embassy to the Mongol court in China, escorting 15 Chinese envoys back home, along with shiploads of treasure. Ibn Battuta maneuvered to get himself appointed as the ambassador. It was the perfect cover to leave India with the Sultan's blessing.
Okay, so he's out. But the road out proves just as dangerous as the court itself, doesn't it? The journey overland to the coast turns into a literal extreme sport.
Yeah, before he even reaches the ships, his caravan is ambushed by Hindu insurgents who are rebelling against the Sultan's heavy taxation.
He is separated from his royal guards, robbed of literally everything he owns, stripped down to his underwear, and forced to hide in swamps just to survive.
Yeah, from a luxury mansion funded by peasant villages to hiding in the mud in his underwear.
The whiplash is incredible. But, this ambush highlights a major distinction in how we view historical travel. When we think of great medieval travelers, Marco Polo is usually the first name that comes to mind.
Right, everyone knows Marco Polo. But the contrast between Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta reveals the true nature of the 14th century world. Marco Polo traveled as an alien in a strange land. He journeyed to places where he didn't speak the language, he didn't understand the customs. He was a complete outsider discovering the unknown.
But Ibn Battuta wasn't exploring the unknown. Even when he was in India or East Africa or the Maldives, he traveled almost entirely within the Dar al-Islam, or at least within the networks of Muslim merchants that extended slightly beyond it.
Exactly. He was constantly surrounded by an infrastructure of Muslim scholars and merchants. He shared a legal language, a religious framework, and social customs with the elites literally everywhere he went. He wasn't stepping off the map. He was a citizen of a hemispheric empire, riding a highly developed cultural highway.
But we do have to look closely at his personal life on that highway. Because when you examine who he traveled with, the whole romantic veneer of the great explorer kind of peels away and the harsher realities of 14th century elite privilege are exposed.
Yeah, his personal life was deeply embedded in the inequalities of his era. As he moved from region to region, he frequently married local women. He'd utilize them for companionship or for local political connections, and then he would just casually divorce them and leave them behind when he decided to move on.
And he justified this by claiming, what, that he wanted to spare them the physical perils of the road.
Right. Which sounds noble on the surface until you look at who he actually did bring on those perilous journeys.
He enslaved concubines.
Exactly. While he left his wives in relative safety, He regularly purchased enslaved concubines and forced them to travel with him through highly dangerous situations.
I mean, there are detailed accounts in his book of his concubines suffering through shipwrecks, near drownings, and just extreme physical hardship.
It really reveals a stark, brutal hierarchy in how he valued human life. Wives were protected for political or social reasons, while enslaved women were treated as expendable comforts. It definitely grounds the story in the grim reality of the time.
It really does. And speaking of uncovering the reality of his story, we have to tackle the China controversy.
Oh, the China controversy.
So he finally escapes India, he sails east, and he claims to have traversed China, visiting Guangzhou and even going as far north as Beijing.
Right, and he writes extensively about the incredible infrastructure there. He praises the safety of the Chinese roads, the economy, but he also claims he suffered deep culture shock. He describes being depressed over the prevalence of what he called infidelity, which basically meant the lack of Islamic cultural dominance in the wider society.
He says he mostly stayed indoors because the local customs distressed him so much.
Yeah, but here is the massive catch that modern historians point out.
I love this part.
The Chinese historical records from the Yuan dynasty, which ruled at the time, they are obsessively meticulous. The historian discipline in China during the Yuan dynasty was to record as much as possible. Every foreign visit, every diplomatic mission, every trade embassy.
But there is absolutely no record of Ibn Battuta or his massive embassy anywhere in the Chinese histories. Not a single mention.
Nothing. The absence of evidence in a bureaucracy that recorded literally everything is glaring, especially if he supposedly went to the capital to see the emperor.
Right. It makes you wonder if this is the 14th century equivalent of a travel influencer exaggerating their itinerary to keep their sponsors happy.
That's a great way to put it, because we have to remember the mechanics of how his book, The Rila, was actually created. He didn't keep a daily diary out in the swamps.
No. He dictated this entire story from memory to a scholar named Ibn Juzay, 30 years after the events took place, and under the direct orders of a Moroccan sultan.
The political context of the book's creation is everything here. The Moroccan sultan wanted a grand, comprehensive survey of the known world to boost his own court's prestige. Ibn Battuta was highly motivated to deliver an epic, complete tale.
So did he make it to China?
Did he make it to the southern coastal ports of China? Very likely. Muslim merchant networks were well established there. But did he travel deep inland to Beijing and meet the emperor? The general scholarly consensus is that he probably padded his resume.
He aggregated other people's content to finish his book.
Basically, yeah. He likely took stories he heard from other merchants and presented them as his own experiences to make the Rila the ultimate travelogue. Similar to some debates about Marco Polo, there are theories that Marco Polo might have been in China as a merchant managing foreign trade, rather than a top advisor to Kublai Khan, as he claimed. Sometimes these travelers embellish their specific roles.
Wow. But, whether he embellished the edges of his map or not, the macroeconomic and social lessons of his journey become terrifyingly real when he finally decides to go home.
Yeah. The ending of this story is wild.
He travels back toward the Middle East and North Africa, and he walks directly into a global apocalypse.
The timing is just unbelievable. He returns just as the Black Death, the bubonic plague, begins wiping out millions across Eurasia. He arrives in Damascus to find the population literally dying in the streets.
And after a quarter of a century away, he finally makes it back to his home in Morocco. He arrives in Tangier only to discover that his own mother had died of the plague just months earlier.
It's heartbreaking. He survived pirates, shipwrecks, bandits, and sword-wielding elephants, only to come home to a plague that took your family. The sensory shock of that return is just hard to fathom.
And the plague did more than just take his family. It permanently fractured the incredibly connected world he had just spent his life traversing.
The zenith of Afro-Eurasian connectivity, that bustling, confident system with its seamless travel and booming trade, it was broken. Populations plummeted, trade routes withered, and the world fundamentally contracted. The era he lived in was over.
It really was. But looking at the entire sweep of his life, his education, his financial maneuvering, his risk mitigation, and his return, the macro lessons for today's world emerge so organically from his survival.
Absolutely. Let's break some of those down.
First, for any economics policymakers listening, his journey proves the sheer economic power of standardization.
Yes. When you have a zone with a common legal framework and trusted currencies, transaction costs plummet. Trade flourishes. Human capital can move freely. Standardization is the engine of economic booms.
Exactly. And for the bankers and finance folks out there, he proves that trust and reputation are the ultimate forms of liquidity. I mean, he didn't carry physical wealth. He carried his reputation as a scholar.
Right. Without verifiable trust networks like that WAX system we talked about, global movement and liquidity dry up entirely. You
Yeah.
need trust.
And perhaps the most vital lesson for any financial traders, gamblers, or anyone navigating a high-risk environment. He knew exactly when to exit.
The most important skill of all.
Ibn Battuta survived because he recognized when political risk curves turned fatal. When Sultan Tughlaq's court became too dangerous, he liquidated his positions, swallowed his pride to live in a cave, and found an exit strategy.
He survived because he knew when to walk away, which is exactly why he died peacefully in his bed at age 65 rather than in a dungeon in Delhi.
He was a survivor. A 21-year-old leveraged a legal degree, charitable trusts, and sheer emotional intelligence to become the pre-modern world's greatest traveler. He basically hacked the socioeconomic systems of his day.
His journey perfectly encapsulates a unique window of history, capturing the absolute peak of global connectivity just before the system collapsed.
It's an incredible story. And that wraps up our deep dive into the life of Ibn Battuta. If you liked this talk, please subscribe and like this channel so you never miss our deep dives.
We really appreciate you taking the time to learn with us today.
Always. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. Think about our modern world of digital nomads, cryptocurrency, and frictionless global markets. We pride ourselves on our connectivity today. But are we actually closer to Ibn Battuta's 14th century network than we realize? Or have we lost the deep cultural trust that once allowed a 21-year-old to walk across the known world using nothing but his education as currency? Keep wondering, and we'll catch you next time.